So I would like to welcome all of you to our online discussion. As many of you know who followed our work, we've been following along closely at Democracy International's how the measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus, necessary and timely as they often might be, have had side effects on democratic rights and democratic institutions around the world. We've had first talk about the effect on elections around the world. We've been interviewing experts, we've been meeting with activists, all of this, of course, online. And from the discussions we've had with people, we've come up with a number of categories of effects to democracy that we are experiencing. And so in the coming weeks, we will be organizing webinars on all of these topics. And to kick this off tonight, we will start with the effects on direct democracy around the world. And I'm very happy to welcome our two panelists, Bruno Kaufmann, who's a global democracy reporter at Swiss Info and board member for Democracy International, and Chang, who's a global ambassador at Negative Vote. Before we get started, I just want to briefly explain how you can participate. So we will start with a short presentation from Bruno and Sam, and afterwards we will open the floor for discussion. For the time being, that means that all participants are automatically muted, but you can unmute yourself at any time. And if you have any questions, you can use the chat for that, or if you have any problems. And then afterwards, during the Q&A, you can raise your hand. There's a technological option for that in the participants box, or ask your question in the chat, and then we will take it from there. So I think I will now invite Bruno Kaufmann to share with us a short presentation on the situation in Switzerland, Sweden, and the world.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Can you hear me? Yes, very good. So I'm happy to see you all and to meet you all on this way. By now we have become very professionals, all of us, in joining this kind of conferences. And I think it's really useful that we do it, and we use the time also to become stronger when this changes or the pandemic is over and we can go out on the streets again, gathering signatures, go to the voting booths, and really be active also at conferences like the Global Forum next year in Bern, which we had to move from this year to next year. But we can really use the time, and it's important to be conscious about the difficulties, but also the opportunities for direct democracy, which we can see. I would like to share a brief presentation about you can say some basics I would like to address. Let's see if that is working. Yes. I would like briefly to talk about direct democracy, which is the issue of tonight, about direct democracy linked to the pandemic in the world, then the situation in Switzerland, where I'm from, where I'm a citizen in, situation in Sweden, where I'm now, where I'm also a citizen of, and also briefly about 3 ways forward. Now, Caroline has already said, I'm a journalist since many years and the global democracy correspondent for the Swiss Info website and media, which is the public broadcaster of Switzerland, the international service in 10 languages, which we since a few years ago have a main focus on direct democracy, and where you can read a lot about direct democracy in Switzerland and the world in 10 different languages. But I'm also a citizen, as I said, of Sweden and Switzerland. I'm very concerned about the rights I have and the possibilities we as citizens have in these 2 countries. Now, globally, we can see that direct democracy in recent years have really seen a really upswing in most countries in the world. There are some provisions for direct democracy, which means the right to put the issue forward to everybody, and also the right to vote on these issues at the ballot box. In our direct democracy navigator, which we developed in the last 12 years, we have gathered all legal designs for direct democracy in the world. And today we are able to show exactly the legal designs of direct democracy on the national and many times also on the regional and local level in more than 110 countries. We have also developed different tools for understanding how direct democracy works and doesn't work, like in the Global Passport on Modern Direct Democracy, and also together at Democracy International and the Global Forum, we have started to develop this democracy community, a global community for direct democracy supporters and activists. And again, we can say that what's going on now, of course, has a huge impact on the practice and the ability to use direct democratic tools. On the map, on the downside, you see again that most countries, the green ones, at some point in the recent years had a national vote on an issue, not just an election. Looking into the world, of course, we see that the pandemic have huge influence on how we use elections and referendums. On this map, which comes from International IDEA, we can see that in many countries, elections have been postponed. In others, they have been both held and postponed, and just in a few, they have been conducted in recent months. So we also see that the negative impacts on democracy have become stronger, like on the picture on the left. I mean, on July 1st, basically democracy in Hong Kong was killed off and was ended. We had also on July 1 the referendum in Russia, so-called referendum, which was a plebiscite to introduce basically eternal government rights for Vladimir Putin. We have other cases which are more, let's say, negative and positive in both directions, like in Poland, where we now will see the second round of the presidential election, and also, for instance, a very well conducted election in Korea already in April. But also this impacts, of course, the ability to gather signatures, to conduct referendums. And this is something which in Switzerland has been very influential because, as you know, Switzerland is one of the countries with a very robust direct democracy provisions on all political levels, from the local to the national. You see also that there is a clear commitment by everybody to hold these votes regularly. On the calendar to the right, you see all the national voting days until 2039. But of course, and this was the fact now when you go to this year, that the May referendums couldn't be held. They were postponed because of the pandemic, because of the uncertainty. But as this pandemic continues, the calendar has been resettled. The gathering periods have been unpaused. So now it's possible to gather signatures again. And in September, we will see quite packed referendum day. On 27th of September, we will vote, for instance, on an initiative about limiting immigration from EU countries. This is not the first vote on immigration in Switzerland. In fact, it will be the 44th national referendum on immigration, which shows also that this is a continuous debate to fine-tune it. And also we'll have maybe the 20th referendum on peace and security issues. It will be a popular referendum about buying new air fighters for the Swiss Army. There will be other votes on hunting. There will be votes on childcare, on parental leave. So many very interesting national votes will happen. At the same time also, we will see local and regional votes about minimum income, about many other things, and we will cover them. And at the online forum in September, we will go into that. But in fact, it was a shock for many Swiss that certainly the ability and the right to gather signature was stopped. And this let's say, enforced the whole debate about digitalization of direct democracy, which has been an issue in Switzerland for many years, but has been in recent years a little bit more to the critical side. And now we can see that more people understand why it is important that in the future we also have the right to gather signatures and to vote electronically. When it comes to Sweden, Sweden is in a very different situation because here we have much less direct democracy. After all, in 2011, the constitution introduced the local and regional citizen initiative, the so-called Volkinitiative, and this has created a lot of activities that people gather signatures about issues which are decided by the local parliament in my hometown here in Sweden, in Arboga, which is a very interesting small place because it was the place where the first Swedish parliament gathered in 1435 and where the movement for female universal suffrage was born in 1865. Here we should have had the first local referendum after a citizen initiative in March, but this was postponed during, in fact, the voting process. So it was postponed, but the local parliament wasn't able to give a new date. And in fact, it's a classical way of trying to avoid the decision making by the people. And the decision was in fact done already by the local parliament. So when we will have the vote at some point in the future, which is not clear yet, it will be about going back before the decision of the local parliament. So there is a big struggle still in Switzerland between, let's say, parliament and the people about the rights involved in direct democracy. And luckily, we will have now a new committee at the national level looking into these issues, a national commission for reform, which was established and which already had a new first meeting in recent weeks, to look into these issues, how to make direct democracy stable and also involving on the national level. And I've been privileged and honored to be called to this commission. So going forward and finalizing this introduction, I think it's really a very, very interesting time to look into what's going on, how it is going on, where you can say direct democracy is pushed back and where it is paused. But at the same time, it's also, of course, the big chance for us to be more precise about what's going on, to understand better what direct democracy means in a modern democracy setting, to do all these Zoom conferences, also having these global forums online like in September, but also basically trying to understand the limitations of direct democracy we have still in most places today. In fact, there are provisions for direct democracy, but in most cases, they are not really able to be implemented properly because there's a lot of hurdles, a lot of setbacks. So I think we should use this. We should have as a way forward to be more reflective about what we are doing, maybe a little bit less running and a little bit more thinking. Secondly, really learn from each another. And thirdly, have a good plan for action to make direct democracy more democratic in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruno. Yes, and we're very lucky to have two panelists now who are binationals, who have one foot in one country and one foot in another, and can really contrast and compare. And so Sam Chang is a direct democracy expert from the US and from Taiwan, which is the youngest direct democracy, let's say. Since 2018, they also have the initiative and referendum right. And Sam will now explain a little bit how the situation has been there.
Okay, I'll first talk a little bit about United States because I started a citizen initiative in El Cerrito, California. And I noticed Evan and Mike Feinstein are participating, so they can perhaps jump in later on after we finish, talk more about United States. But my project in El Cerrito was a citizen initiative to allow citizens to have a vote, a negative vote. And it was, we started the signature collection process in late February. And because of the shelter in place orders that were restricting, put into place in that area, of course, the signature collection effort had to stop. And basically the project is not able to proceed. We will not be able to make to get this ballot measure presented to the voters in November. And because of that, of course, I'm very interested in whether there's any chance to do electronic signature collection in California and also other places in the United States. So I'd be very interested to hear more about that from other panelists or other participants. In Taiwan, the virus situation in Taiwan is that because it really hasn't affected our normal activities at all. We basically can go to do pretty much everything that we have been doing, except that we wear a mask most of the time when in public places. In public transportation, it's required. And so direct democracy proceeds. This year, since April, there are 3 proposals already, gathering enough signatures to qualify for a review by the Central Election Commission. 2 has to do with trying to change the constitution, and I believe those will be rejected by the commission because changing the constitution is simply not allowed by referendum. It has to go through a there are very high hurdles to change the constitution in Taiwan, and it's not allowed through referendum. And but the third one is very interesting. It's trying to protect the Datan algal reef, which is about 27 kilometers, very rare, almost 7,500 years old, the algal reef. And I understand that people know the coral reef grows maybe 1 centimeter a year. Algal reef grows 1 centimeter every 20 years. So this is very rare. The environmental protection groups that have launched this initiative have been trying to stop the government from building a LNG terminal in that area. Met the current president 3 times, held over, I think, 105 press conferences over the last 3 years already, and still was not able to stop the government from proceeding with their plan to build the terminal. So that's so they feel compelled to launch this citizen initiative, and within, I think, just a week, they were able to collect over 5,000 signatures. Basically all by hand, all paper-based. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this initiative put in front of the voters. People here may know that Taiwan Referendum Act was revised last year so that the initiative referendum voting day is fixed for every 2 years for the 4th Saturday in August. So the next time we can vote on an initiative or referendum in Taiwan is next year. The way it looks now, there's one pro-nuclear power initiative that's left over from 2019. They collected not signatures, but because the law changed, they have to wait until this next voting day. And this algal reef project, I believe they will collect enough signatures to reach to qualify. And there may be more in the making to try to revise the Referendum Act itself. For example, I've heard some people talking about launching an initiative to try to revise the Referendum Act itself. So that may be in the works. So basically, the virus has not been a non-issue for Taiwan in terms of activities for direct democracy. One issue that is relevant still is electronic signature collection. By law, the government is mandated to set up that system. However, I believe the Central Election Commission has deliberately held it back. So even though a system has been designed, it has not been implemented. So that's a setback in terms of electronic signature collection here. So that's basically my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the both of you. We like to have this this discussion format because we also want to know what you are all interested in, and so at this point, I'd really like to open up the floor to questions to our two panelists. You can do that by raising your hand in the participants box. There should be there's a first question already. Great, I'm just going to finish explaining the options. By raising your hand, so you can, if you don't know where to do that, that's in the participants box. I think there's a button more and there it says raise your hand. Otherwise, you can also write it in the chat. And for people who are following us on YouTube, there is also an option to write in questions there. And we will try to take note of those as well. But so at this point, I would like to invite Evan to ask his question.
Hi, I thought I'd jump in because we have a similar situation here in Boulder, Colorado, where I led an effort to get online petitioning into the Boulder City Charter, where it's been since 2018. But both city staff and state, the Secretary of State have essentially put it off for 2 years and really have obstructed it in every way possible. So it's a similar situation as in Taiwan. In Colorado as a whole, the governor proposed allowing a complicated emailed signature system where you would download a petition, sign it by hand, have another person witness it, either in person or by Zoom, etc. And then you would either email or mail it in to the Secretary of State. The Colorado Supreme Court just struck that down. So we don't have online petitioning of any kind in Colorado or in Boulder, even though it's been a big issue for several years here.
I don't know, Bruno or Sam, would you like to respond to that?
No, hello, Evan.
Hey, Bruno.
I'm happy to see you again. And we met last December when we discussed this. And unluckily, it was a hard way to really support that. But I think this crisis now showing many places around the world that digital online signature gathering is obviously one of the ways forward, especially if this crisis will take much more longer time than we maybe initially have expected. I mean, in Switzerland, for instance, it was paused for about 6 weeks, the gathering period, and now it has been reinstated. But of course, it's certain initiatives already have indicated that they will not be able to gather enough signatures because it's much harder now. People, I mean, are not as willing to go forward, to be approached, to meet them on the streets like it has been before. People are afraid for good reasons sometimes. And I think this will show, hopefully, more and more that direct democracy in a modern way needs this kind of digital opportunities. And I would also say that after all, in the European Union, even if it's not a full-fledged initiative process, the gathering of statements of support has been established in 2012 and has seen several revisions regarding the system, and now there will be a central gathering system put into force, so people can gather these 1 million signatures within 1 year. And I think this is maybe something which should be really also be showed to many other countries, because this has also motivated national governments to introduce these forms. One example is Finland, where you can gather signatures online. The question is, of course, always the trust into the system as such. I mean, in many countries like US or in Switzerland, still verification is basically a local issue. It's an issue of the region, not of the national level. And this is, of course, the question about the trust into centralized systems, which in many countries, for good reasons, is not there yet. But I also think maybe Sam can add on that. I mean, it would be really interesting to see now if there are really good arguments for the government in Taiwan and the Central Election Commission to hold back this fundamental right of gathering signatures also electronically. And I also saw that Mike want to add something on it.
Right. I'll just add on what happened in Taiwan is that the Central Election Commission under not the current one, the previous one, commission chairman, they had already set up the electronic signature collection system, only subject to security check. And that Mr. Liu left the office in 2017, actually. So in November 2017. And so the current chairman claims that they haven't finished a security check. This is after 3 years. Okay, so it's basically obstruction. What we hope that will happen is that with this, with the cases that are going on now, there are 3 cases that are being reviewed by the Central Election Commission. Especially the environmental protection one has very good popular support. I believe it will have popular support, and these are the traditional groups that are very pro DPP, the current ruling party, and they will exert a lot of pressure on the ruling party, knowing that the system is already ready to go, and yet the commission is stopping to implement it. So once we get into the second phase, for Taiwan requires around 300,000 signatures to qualify. It has to be collected within 6 months period. And for anybody who has done this sort of thing, you know, it's very costly to do this by paper, right? So there will be a huge pressure during the phase 2 of collection signatures on the Central Election Commission to actually implement a system that they have already. So I'm hopeful that pressure will be, we'll see that will be effective. And in addition to that, our association, the Negative Vote Association, we have set out a private system to collect signatures electronically online. We intend to also try to lend that or suggest to the environmental groups that use the private system and then collect as many signatures as possible, and then sue the government if the government still doesn't launch the national system that it has already.
Great, thank you. I believe that Mike had written in the comments that he has a comment on this particular question. So maybe we can just take that at this point now. Mike, you would have to unmute yourself because everybody's automatically muted.
There we go. Okay, all good? You can hear me?
All good.
Great. Hi, everyone. Long time no see. I'm in the desert It's going to be 45 here today, and on Sunday it will be 49. So the comment I have on online petitioning is, as many of you know, we have one of the worst democracies in the US of the OECD countries. And one of the ways in which that manifests is that if you're not a member of the Taiwan to get on the ballot, there are extremely high signature gathering thresholds to qualify a candidate. So I'm in the Green Party. Our Green Party candidate's trying to get on the ballot this summer. And what we've found is in a lot of the states, we simply can't get the signatures for the same reasons everybody's talking about before with the virus. To have the ability to do online petitioning. New Jersey is allowing us to do it. I think Illinois is allowing us to. If the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, which is the other major small party in the United States, were on the ballot in the last election gathering the signatures. So this unexpected issue about just getting on the ballot is opening up online petitioning in this country in a way we hadn't expected beforehand. Over.
Thank you very much. I believe that then there was a question from Carlos. You also have to unmute yourself and then you can just ask your question.
Yes, I'm very glad to see you all, and I hope everybody is okay, also your family and your friends. And I say hello from Mexico with my strange in English. It's very important interest for me to be here in this discussion, because at this moment in Mexico, we are discussing in the public atmosphere, in the public discussion, how to start again the electoral and modern direct democratic process. We have all stopped and we are discussing how to make it work again with one idea of my own. Of course, we have to take care about health and life of the persons, but also of health and life of democracy. This is not only a problem about procedures or institutions, it is about rights. We have to keep well the right for the health and the right for the political and for the democracy. So in this time, I have one big question. In the cases that you are working or studying, do you find some significant lessons, good practice, good things, concrete, specifically to try to merge taking care about health and taking care about election and citizen participation? Of course, introducing the online and the digital service and devices it's a very good idea, because it helps us to keep the distance between the people, the persons. But as you know, nobody there's some people that can't take these tools because the difference and the poverty in our countries. Well, my question is, what kind of significant lessons and good practices do you find? Of course, is not to okay, let's take it as well to Mexico, but to have a spread, a point of view to can contribute in my own country to start it again. Thank you very much.
Yes, I think Bruno meant.
Yeah, I can. Yes, I can just give one example. I mean, it's clear that this crisis is like a mirror to our societies, where the weaker socially, politically, economically weaker people are suffering much more than the ones who are well established, who have better opportunities. And we see that in countries like your country, Mexico, that this is a huge problem to combine these fundamental rights of democracy with the protection of health. And we see it all over the world. And in a way, democracy, and especially direct democracy, is also like a mirror to a society. And together, they really showing us that where are the weak points and where are the strong points. I just give you an example of how a country combined this protection of health with their democratic rights. And that was a few weeks ago in the presidential election in Iceland, where they voted, instead of just having a few days for voting, they had a 5 weeks period, and people could book their voting time online, so they were alone in the voting station. Of course, this is maybe hard to implement in countries with a huge population, but I think it was quite nice to show that I will book my time to vote and I will be basically alone. And they could combine it, and they had a high turnout. So with a goodwill, I think this kind of democratic practice and health protection are absolutely to be done. But of course, in countries where this whole idea of protecting health is a very political issue, a very issue of uneven distribution, then you have a big problem even when it comes to democracy. And I think the US is a good example for that.
Yes, Sam, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think that's useful for all activists is to try to also work on changing local INR regulations or laws. For example, in Taiwan, we have one local initiative coming up in the city of Hsinchu. And the reason that Hsinchu is particularly notable is that the local legislature passed the most friendly INR regulation for that city. So it only takes 34 signatures for phase 1 and 3,400 for phase 2 to qualify a ballot measure. So in our city, there is a initiative basically started by a lot of moms who have very little experience in activism, but they started an initiative that demanding clean water for the city, and of course it's a learning process for everybody. I met with the leaders just last week, and the initiative itself, even if it exceeds being approved by the voters, it will be difficult to implement, because the clean water involves not just the Hsinchu city, it involves the Hsinchu County, which is next door, but the water comes from the Hsinchu County. And so whatever the Hsinchu city voters approve, it requires a cooperation from another place. So it's going to be difficult to implement, even if it's approved. Another issue that would be faced by all proponents in Taiwan is that we still have a minimal approval threshold, which is 25% of electorate must approve a ballot measure. So that's a very high threshold, especially when election is not held with combined with the general election date. So these are obstacles we see. Even with a very popular environmental issue, voters may not go there to vote because it's not a general election day. So these are challenges that we need to overcome So there are efforts to do improvements at the local level. For example, for the city of Taipei, myself and some other activists, we were able to lobby the legislators, and in January of this year, 2020, the city approved revisions to the local INR regulations, including mandating the Taipei city must set up a electronic signature collection system. So that's something we're following up with the members to make sure the city will proceed to set that system up. So these are things that can be done at the local level. Democracy is hard. It's hard work. It takes time.
Democracy is not a sofa. Right. I believe Aftab had a question, so you can unmute yourself and just go ahead and ask.
Good evening, everyone. I'm originally from Pakistan, but I live in the UK. Thank you very much, Bruno, for your interesting and thought-provoking presentation. My question is to Bruno, that in your sense, in your studies, what you see that the pandemic will affect the democratic movements on globally and generally on global level, but specifically in South Asian countries where most of the poor people live. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. I mean, it's obvious that we are in the middle of the pandemic. We are not at the end, and that's of course the big question mark. How long time will this phase of, let's say, limited fundamental freedoms to use be in place? And I mean, will there be months? Will there be years? And of course, we have in many countries, also in South Asia, we have governments who are fundamentally not too much interested in making democracy more democratic, but to consolidate their own power, to inflict conflict and polarization. And this is, of course, in a way, reinforced through this pandemic. And again, I think it will be very important that democracy supporters transnationally really don't give up in such a situation and feel alone. And we should use all our channels in linking together. And this is also a big chance, of course, because this is a global crisis and everybody is affected, not in the same way, but everybody is affected, and everybody can understand sometimes if there is a catastrophe or a crisis in some place, it's very hard to others to really take this in because it's far away. But now we hear the news from Australia, we hear the news from Brazil, we hear the news from the United States, and we are in the same situation. So this is, I think, is also a big opportunity for the democracy supporters and friends around the world to become much stronger. But of course, it's the principal fight about democracy is not won. We see that, and I'm very sad about really trying to take that in, that democracy has finally died in Hong Kong, and even people outside Hong Kong who are promoting democracy in this place are under risk if they are active for democracy under this new security law. And this is a very sad thing to see, and we see it in Russia with the latest plebiscite for this kind of constitutional change to not strengthen democracy. And of course, it will be very important to see what's going on and what's happening, for instance, in the United States in the next 120 days. So in fact, we are in a very decisive time for democracy. Democracy has never been as, let's say, popular as it is today, but never been as challenged as it is. And what is important is that we use all our freedoms, all our rights, all our tools for democracy to make democracy stronger. And this is as true in your part of the world as it is in ours and other parts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? I don't see any raised hands. Otherwise, I had a little bit of a follow-up question on that. In your opinion, what do you think? How can activists organize now? What are the options for direct democracy activists to work? Because obviously there are restrictions to what we can do. People are under lockdown. It's difficult to gather signatures. So what are the options you think, not on the political level, but for activism?
I mean, one thought I have on that is that we really should use this time where we maybe are not able to move around as much as normally to, in a way, become more informed, to learn about why democracy can work and not work, which are the hurdles. I mean, we heard from Sam just before that, and this is really fascinating for me to hear that now Taiwan is in a phase where you go into the really the smaller things, the details about thresholds, about hurdles, about signature numbers, something which, when you are used to this, are confronted all the time. And I mean, our friends in Germany for many years now have used the process in the States to make it more available. Using direct democracy for direct democracy, I think it's the most important thing we can as activists do, really trying not to think that there will be at some point nice government people who give us more rights, but to fight for it through the rights we already have.
I was thinking maybe Sam, because Taiwan is a country that's only recently introduced direct democracy on the national level. Maybe could you explain a little bit how that happened, how that campaign went, how long it has taken for activists to create direct democracy instruments on a national level?
Sure. Taiwan Referendum Act has been around for a long time, but the threshold was so high that it was not really practical for many years. In 2018, because the threshold was lowered significantly, that was a year when I think there were 10 initiative referendum that reached the qualify for the ballot. And there was active participation in voting. So I believe 7 of the 10 were approved by voters. And as people in this audience will understand, initiative referendum is typically something the ruling party doesn't like. If they like it, they can try to pass it through the legislature, right? So usually the people in power do not like whatever initiative the citizens want to put forth. So naturally, the ruling party reacted to try to rein this in, and therefore, I think it was in June of 2019, the Referendum Act was revised in a very I would say brutal way, basically decoupling the initiative referendum voting from the general election, and still kept the minimum passing threshold I mentioned earlier. So this next national voting for initiative referendum day in next year in August will be the first time when this is put into practice, when the election, when the voting for the INR held on a different day than the election day. And that will be a very interesting day because most of us activists are very pessimistic about participation on an off-election day. In an off-election day, voting is usually very, very low, even if it's a contested election by two major parties. So we'll see the first evidence of that in Taiwan when we have this. I think in August we will have a election for the Kaohsiung mayor because the previous mayor was recalled. So we have a sort of what is called a by-election, is it, to elect a new mayor in Kaohsiung, but it's not on a general election day. Participation probably will be very low, and that would be a good indication that how this generally how this voting for initiative referendum might be if coming up next year. So the positive side of all this is that these will build up pressure. These will build up pressure for local and central governments to change. I believe electronic signature collection is a very, very important tool that we should aim for, both at the national level and the local level, so that to make initiative easier. And then either we remove the minimum passing threshold or get back to the tied election with an initiative referendum again. That one of these will have to change.
Yeah, thank you very much. I believe there's a question from Mike. So please go ahead.
Hi. So first, I just want to call attention to Ann Williams, who's on this. She's also from Santa Monica, where I come from. And she's one of our giants with our local League of Women Voters, and she's great. So as Ann well knows, in municipal government in Santa Monica, we have a history of many initiatives and referenda on development issues. Whenever there is a big development project, we're out getting signatures and putting it on the ballot and fighting them. When I got elected to city council many, many years ago, it was following my being one of the leaders of a referendum against a big project. So a lot of the people who are gathering signatures over the years are getting old. And they don't have the energy to go out and get the signatures the way they used to. So I've wondered about this model for Santa Monica. And my question for our organization here is, are there any examples on our website that go into the details of how municipal governments are going through the verification process, the kind of costs? Do they try and do it themselves? Do they try and work with the county or other level of government? Because if we were going to give direction to our city staff to look at the issue, it's all nice to talk about in theory, but what kind of substance is available on our site as a resource for a city to look into this? Over.
I believe Bruno can offer some insight there as a local government.
I mean, it's a big issue, and I think what we are trying with the Global Forum on Democracy International is to establish an international league of democracy cities where exactly these kind of issues can be focused on and discussed. We have, as you may have seen, we have developed a Magna Carta on democracy cities indicating 20 different dimensions. And it would be great if a city like Santa Monica or other cities who are really into these issues would join this league and participate in this exchange, sharing experiences, because as you said, there are so many practical experiences and challenges related to direct democracy. And of course, in most places, there's a principal opposition to it, which have to be overcome. But then when it comes to the procedural level, we see still a lot of things which are put into the process, which makes it impossible. And finally, when we have a good process and a good procedure, we have all these practical challenges. And there we would like the International League of Democracies, it is to play really a role, to be the leaders with good examples, good proposals, how to solve it, because it's all about, I mean, it's a hard work, but it's also about goodwill, and it's understanding that more involved people, more responsible citizenry makes a community, makes a city, makes a society much more stable and much less open to populists, to extremists, and to people undermining democracy.
So you're saying it's really just, we're really just developing this. There aren't a whole lot of big models, and it's to be created. It's a reality to be created yet. Exactly.
And I really like your pool and understand that you have to be in the water. Yeah.
I'm a Scorpio.
He is in the desert.
It's hot here. It's really hot. Yeah.
There was one other small question, I think also related to Sam's comment, whether or not in Switzerland people vote on initiatives and referendum on the same day as they do on candidates.
Yes. I mean, this is, of course, I mean, this is an interesting conversation I had also many times with Sam and with others. And it's this problem that we are so much fostered into a party politics society that the parties are the mobilizing factors in many democracies, that when you have a non-election day popular voting, then it's often very lower threshold, lower turnout, and this can create a challenge. But at the same time, and I think Sam said it in the end, it's also time to develop direct democracy as its own pillar of a modern democracy, that we, the citizens, are able to vote on issues, and we don't need all the time to do it under a certain party line or under a certain color. And I think that's maybe really also a good chance for Taiwan to learn to have direct democracy as a complementary, additional way of doing democracy. And it would be unlucky, I think, to go back to link it too much to the two main parties. And it would be good, of course, and necessary to take away these thresholds, which can invalidate votes as you still have.
Then we have a question on YouTube. So some people are also watching on YouTube. And that question is if you see a different role for direct democracy in making difficult decisions about whether or not to open up economies and places. So specifically related to the crisis we're experiencing now. I don't know. Bruno or Sam, if you would like to answer that.
I can just give you an example. I mean, in Switzerland already there is a referendum going on about the emergency laws which were approved by the parliament in May. There is a gathering to put this on a national vote. And I must say, I'm not totally sure that these forms of direct democracy, which involves signature gathering and this kind of referendums, is the best way to deal with this kind of emergency laws. It's more important that these kind of laws are really not lasting too long, and that Parliament has a good review on it. While direct democracy is more a process which takes time, and we need space and time for preparing, for discussing. And it's sometimes a risky thing to think that a referendum can be done a few days after a decision is made by Parliament. This opens up, in my view, to a very polarized way, you can say a weaponizing of direct democracy, which is maybe not the most healthy thing to be used as. But Sam, maybe you have some comment.
Yeah, I basically agree with Bruno. I don't think direct democracy is the way to go in a very specific health situation as we have now. I think in this situation, we really need to respect the experts' leadership, rather than putting it to a vote for, whether that may not necessarily based on science. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any comments appear in the YouTube thread, so thank you. I believe Evan, you wanted to ask another question, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't really get an answer to my question about whether the Swiss vote on initiative and referenda on the same day that they vote on candidates, or is there a separate, apart from the quarterly voting on initiatives and referenda, is there also a separate date that people vote on candidates?
Yes. On the national level, it's the case, yes. On national level, when you go through the calendar, you see every 4th year, you see the date of the vote, and then you see a little N, which means the national vote for candidates. So when we have the parliament election in Switzerland, we don't have other issues on the ballot. Why? Because that would be of course, the invitation to all parties to put many different issues on the ballot at the same time. And because we have the votes every 3rd month, it's still possible, of course, for the parties to use initiatives, referendums to campaign and to make their case, but not at the same day as the election. When it comes to the states, to the cantons and local level, there are candidate elections and direct democracy votes at the same time, but not on the national level.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Please feel free to continue to ask questions if you have it. But a couple of people have mentioned that there's a lot of interesting people who have joined our meeting from all over the world. At this point, I would really like to invite you to also to tell us about impacts to direct democracy that you have seen in your country. For example, we have someone from South Africa on the call, Jim Powell. I was wondering if you would tell us a little bit about the situation in South Africa. It's something we don't often hear about.
Hi. We don't have any direct democracy in South Africa. In fact, the situation is getting worse, where we're moving more and more to a totalitarian regime. We have a good constitution with 2 great problems. One is that the president's got too much power, and there's no accountability of the politicians to the voters. There's no recall. There's no right for the voters to actually enter into direct democracy. Everything has to go through Parliament. And we've even got to the extent where the ruling party is now launching expropriation without compensation, which means they can take everything away from you for nothing.
And under the current situation with the coronavirus, I believe you're also in South Africa, you also have a shelter-in-place order in place. Is it possible to do your work as activists, at least, to lobby for direct democracy? Is there an option for that?
There isn't an understanding within the country of direct democracy, and I've gone through a lot of the standard activists and civil organizations right now, and I would really like to have some sort of instructions or education of how to get direct democracy going, because what I've been listening to is that these are countries which already have some form of direct democracy. We're way down there with nothing.
Yes, I think both of our panelists actually have a lot of experience in advocating for direct democracy, also in countries that don't have any direct democratic institutions yet. So I don't know if either of you would like to comment on that.
I just may comment a little bit on Jim's note. I mean, we have read from you for several years, and I understand that it's very hard in a country where there are no provisions at all to start from. And in my view and my experience, it's obviously very, very important to try to find, for instance, a local government to start. I mean, a local leader who understands maybe the necessity of making democracy more democratic, more participatory and available, to maybe making a case, and a practical case, for direct democracy, because it's never possible to introduce direct democracy as an abstract theoretical issue. It's only possible to do it in a practical way. I experienced that here in Sweden 25 years ago. There was nothing like that, like direct democracy, and some colleagues and friends who became mayors, they introduced in a way top-down local direct democracy, just to show the practice and the reality of, for instance, people being able to vote on taxes, on planning issues. And this creates a momentum where you can showcase to others why this is not just a theoretical and abstract issue. I think that's the biggest hurdle we have, and it's no idea to start with the president or with the highest authorities to try to make them open to that. It's really good to try to bring people into local government which understand the necessity and have also the wisdom to bring that forward. And we can see that all over the world, in fact, that devolution and decentralization helps. And I mean, our friends which are here on the call from Germany, they can tell us hundreds of stories about that, how from the local to the regional, and hopefully at some point also to the national, direct democracy is growing.
Well, one of the concepts I've come up with is to present a contract to the political parties and the candidates, particularly for ward councils, so that they commit themselves to direct democracy. And the concept is very simple. If they haven't signed the contract and you negotiate it with them, okay, you just simply don't vote for them. And that is what I'm trying to get across. It isn't working.
So, I mean, do you have any place in South Africa, any local government you feel that maybe the local mayor or government is a little bit more open than others to these ideas?
Well, there is one where the whole of the council has been placed under administration because it's effectively collapsed. There's no services, the money's being wasted, stolen, etc. And I'm working now with the local community organizations so that they can say, well, let's do something so that we don't end up in the same situation that we have before, but it's an uphill battle.
Nice. I see. Yeah, I mean, that's the democracy by crisis development, which sometimes you see that there is a big crisis, a big catastrophe, and people need to learn from that. Yes.
Thank you.
I believe Mike has mentioned that he would like to ask a question to Jim.
Yeah, hi Jim. I'm no expert on South Africa politics. I was just there once for a couple of weeks in 2002 for a UN conference. But my question is there any principles in the Constitution, the post-apartheid Constitution, that you could point to that would, was there a preamble, for example, that you could point to say, well, that would imply that some level of direct democracy would be part of meeting the mandate of the post-apartheid country? Over.
Right, okay. The closest we've got to it is where there must be public participation on any laws that are going through, which they try to avoid. And also within the Constitution, if there's a challenge in court, they have to be shown to have acted reasonably and rationally. And we've had a number of laws struck down because they just simply tried to ignore, shall we say, the will of the people. But it's a very simple thing for me. And that is, when you vote, you decide who gets employed as a politician. When you pay their salaries, Okay, when you pay your taxes, you pay their salaries, and that describes the voter as the employer of the politician. Over.
Great, thank you. I believe Carlos would like to ask a question. He's raised his hand. Please go ahead.
Yes, I hope I am not going to go out of the issue that we are talking about, but I want to ask you, do you have or do you know some kind of a study case about the impact of all these situations in the civic culture? I mean, it's not only about procedures or tools to get into the participation. It's also about the public and civic culture. It's a very important issue in countries like mine, like Mexico. By the way, Viva Mexico, of course, I saw it in the chat. And because before the pandemic, and I think after the pandemic, we have a very strong challenge about the public perception of the public affairs and the political matters and the possibilities to incentives to get into the direct modern democracy. So I just want to know if you know that somebody is studying this, collecting data about how all this thing is impact to the perceptions, not only the procedures of the laws and the ways to get in participation, but also in the civic culture. And I finish with that. I think that there is a lot of impact of this situation. We have the impact in the collective fragility awareness and the needs to work together, not to be together physically, but to get decision together to face this issue. It could be a good notice to civic culture in order to democratic relationships and contribute to the common interest. So my question, in fact, is there some studies about the impact in the civic culture, not only in the mechanisms and the possibilities of the procedures?
Maybe Sam, I would be interested in hearing if you know about something like this in Taiwan, because you mentioned before that it's sort of business like usual, just with masks. Do you have any perspective on how that is in Taiwan?
I'm not aware of any studies that Carlos was probably looking for, but I can comment a little bit about what I see, my observation in terms of the building up a culture for direct democracy. I think, as Caroline has already mentioned, direct democracy in practice is still very young for Taiwan. And for activists like myself who have specific ideas want to promote, we see a lot of obstacles in practice. And we see that unfortunately, there will be a lot of failures along the way. For example, in 2018, as I mentioned earlier, there were many referendums approved by the voters, overwhelmingly. And many of the people who supported those measures feel the government basically took steps to either ignore the mandate or took steps to circumvent what the people had voted upon. And so the way to fix that, the way I see that needs to be fixed, is that the Referendum Act itself needs to be further revised so that it follows closer to the Swiss model or the California model, where if a initiative referendum, when it's proposed, it has to be very clear and specific, so that once it's approved by the voters, it will be law. It will be law and cannot be altered by the legislative branch or by the government. And that means the Referendum Act itself needs to be changed, needs to be refined more. And unfortunately, to get to that place, we'll need to see some failures along the way, meaning people need to feel so frustrated and angry, they would demand these changes. Unfortunately, I see that as a necessary step. And I see that coming up actually in Taiwan, that for the next phase of people voting on important issues they care about, they may see after they voted on it, nothing happens. And they have to ask why nothing happens, and then demand more changes. So these frustrations, I believe, is just part of what we need to do to further to get success eventually.
Thank you. Bruno, I believe you wanted to comment as well.
Yeah, I mean, Carlos' question is very important because it's really, in a way, a new experience of a public experience we do locally, nationally, and globally, something which nobody of us, in a way, has experienced in that way ever, that we are all in the same situation. And we have, of course, other crises, the climate crisis, human rights crisis. All these things are globally and cannot be limited. But what we can see is, in a way, that the different kind of democratization is the answer to this crisis. And it's not you can say a world government or just a strong national leaders. It's really a more responsible ability of everybody to take responsibility through a democratic system, which is, of course, needs to be also more local than in many places it is today, and more direct and more digital. And in that way, I think our role here in this democracy community is, in a way, in between the situation where really the very many people are on the streets to fight for democracy, like we have seen now in Hong Kong and other places, where really people have to fight for their basic freedoms. And on the other side, when we have introduced forms of direct democracy, it's, of course, everybody who use it. But in between, how to do it and how to be knowledgeable about what's important when we design these tools and what's important when we are looking into the infrastructure. This is obviously not something, let's say, the majority of people are really willing and dedicated to. So there we need to be very active to gather this kind of knowledge and to put it together and to put together our limited efforts for the best. And I can just give you finally an example I've been involved in recently in the Ukraine. The Ukraine is a country which have been a Soviet-style regime for so many years, and where last year the majority of the young people especially voted for a president which was also much younger than all the others before, and which promised, in fact, to introduce forms of direct democracy. Now I've been involved in many hearings at the parliament, in discussions with MPs, and it's so hard to bring in the new thinking of direct democracy into a system which is so much informed about a non-democratic system. So, for instance, now they proposed a law for direct democracy which is 60,000 words. And in comparison, the Swiss law on direct democracy is just 2,000 words. And already this shows you that a law which is so comprehensive which includes everything, will never work, because you will always be able to say this is not followed, because if you have to follow millions or thousands of rules at the same time, it will not work. So these kind of experiences and exchanges are very important. But this, of course, I mean, our task is both very rewarding because we can really make a difference, but at the same time, it's also never as easy as the good ideas are really prevailing, because most people are not so conscious about the importance of them. And that's the hard thing, that we really need to become even smarter in communicating what's really important and what's less important and how we can do it. And I think this crisis really gives us this chance to focus on a few things about making democracy more locally available, more direct, and more digitally. And if we manage a little of steps on this way, also thanks to this big crisis, I think that's a very good, let's say, result we could show maybe in a few years all over the world.
Thank you very much. That's very hopeful. Before we close off, I think we have one more question from Evan. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Jim asked, how would you get direct democracy from a government that doesn't want to give it to you? And a little history of the United States might help here. Back in the late 1890s, people who wanted to get the vote for women, who wanted to get secret ballot voting, and who wanted to get direct election of US senators, which back then were appointed by state legislatures. Those three groups got together and they decided, well, the best way to get these things is to first get direct democracy. And so they joined forces in a coalition and they demanded, you know, by surrounding the state capitals, they demanded initiative and referendum. And then once they got it, they quickly, within a few years, did get women's suffrage, secret ballot voting, and direct election of senators. So you need to put together a coalition and convince them to put aside their immediate desires and get direct democracy first.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point on how the process is, of course, how you get the issues voted on. So yeah, and I just wanted to ask Mike, maybe if he wants to, he's been posting a couple of things in the chat, all of the ballot measures that are currently in circulation in California, if he wants to tell us something about that. Or has he?
Unmute. Okay.
Okay.
The first one is California independence from the United States. And there was already a feeling for that before the Nazi administration that we have in the White House today. And certainly people in California are feeling more disconnected to the rest of the country. Now, whether that would happen constitutionally or not, nevertheless, they're out getting the signatures for that ballot measure right now. And when you go and you follow that link, there's a public comment period mandated for every measure that is submitted to the Secretary of State before it goes into circulation. And that's a good democratic check and balance for people to check it for all sorts of issues. So the first link has that measure, and then the second link shows how many additional measures have been filed. A couple of years ago, our Ann and my state assembly member, Richard Bloom, who was my vice mayor when I was mayor years ago, he actually got the cost to file raised from a couple $100 to $2,000 just to try and discourage people from filing initiatives. But the reality is most initiatives are filed by people who have a lot of money and are planning on funding the signature gathering campaign. So that hasn't stopped it. But it's very interesting. You can see the range from very broad issues to very small issues. And one of the, since everyone is aware of the Black Lives Matter movement, in 1996, there was a ballot measure that was an anti-affirmative action measure to prevent us from using affirmative action in our state universities, in our cities, etc. And when I was on my city council, we had trouble trying to diversify our police department because which was almost all white at the time, because we wanted to use affirmative action policies and were prevented from state law. So that was a very right-wing measure that passed overwhelmingly in the 90s when those kind of things were passing. And our state legislature now is actually putting a measure on the ballot themselves in November to repeal the ban on affirmative action. Other quick comment I'll make about Elon Musk, since that was in the chat. Some of you have heard about the stupid Kanye West declaring himself for president in the last couple of days. And the positive in that is that the education to adopt what I think the rest of you call single transferable vote, and we call ranked choice voting in the United States, which the Irish and the Australians use. The Democrats are so freaked out that Kanye West may get votes that they think they are entitled to. And the same thing obviously happens with the Green Party, that the education for ranked choice voting, the Kanye West thing is an opportunity to educate more people about it. And I'll close on this. In the state of Maine, where, to Evan's point, they use the initiative process to enact ranked choice voting for state and federal offices, the US Senate race there this year, where Susan Collins, the Republican member who gave, again, I'm using these words, but the fascist people that we have on the Supreme Court that gave the deciding votes to put the anti-choice Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, she's up for re-election, and that race has ranked choice voting this year. So that Senate race could determine the control of the United States Senate, which could determine the control of the Supreme Court. And because it's using ranked choice voting, this is an opportunity to educate the United States on an electoral reform, which we need, that we never would have been able to do before. But because that race is so significant, that's happening. And that's something to watch here in the next couple months. Over.
Thank you. Yeah, so a quick introduction into the ballot measures going on in California. We have to end our session here now because we said we would go until 8 o'clock. I just wanted to ask, I wanted to thank both of our panelists for joining and for your insights in this. And I just wanted to ask you, is there anything else that you think people should keep in mind during this crisis, and what we can do for direct democracy? One sentence.
Yes. Let's use the time most useful.
Great.
Stay healthy.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who tuned in, also to the people who watched it on social media or on YouTube, and we hope to see you during one of our next sessions. We will have these every Tuesday at the same time. So thank you very much. The information for that you can find on our website.
Tack så mycket.
Yeah, thank you very much.